It just became where the church wasn't particularly bothered. It just said, well, we'll accept it. There's like 3 different endings to the Gospel of Mark. And the church just basically said, we don't know which is the real one, we'll just take them all. And from one perspective, that's totally a legitimate option to make. But from another one, it's like, wait a second, which one's the original? Well, the church finally got tired of this. And in the 1500s, they decided, they're like, you know what, we're going to put an end to all of this speculation. And they said that what is and what is not canonical is an issue of faith. And so at this point, to use our terminology, what have they basically done to this question? If you do not think the Gospel of Mark belongs, you take that up with God. We're going to say it does belong. So we're basically asserting that we're going to use authority and conformity. Like, let's say you do not like the book of James. I don't know why you wouldn't. The book of James is an awesome book. It really is. It's full of great things, like if your brother or sister comes to you and says, hey, I'm hungry, and you go, okay, I'll pray for you. And he's like, no, that doesn't do anything for their hunger. Give them food. They basically said, if you don't agree with us, we're kicking you out. So now we have conformity, authority, ostracism. We have all of these things happening all at once. Now, here is the sort of pullback. Here is the sort of question we can do now. What if we find a new manuscript like the Gospel of Thomas that we hadn't known about? What if we hypothetically discover a cache of manuscripts that we had not seen for 1,500 years? Is this a hypothetical question? No. Why not no?
Because they just found recently.
Well, recently, historically, right? Historically recent, people have found other texts. So we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have the Nag Hammadi Library, we have other manuscripts that have shown up. So now, here would be the question. Should we accept the Gospel of Thomas into the New Testament canon? How would we decide that?
I guess if it followed along with everything else,
Well,
like
it
if
sounds
it
like
fits in there well.
right.
I mean, so that's basically what Russell is saying. It sounds like something. I mean, how would we answer this question? Like, if you said, you know what, I see this as an inspired book. How would we decide to accept it? I mean, this is a real issue. Like, does anyone notice the difference between, say, a Catholic Bible versus a Protestant Bible? Yeah, you have these other books. So how do you decide? Yeah, we don't like that book. How?
Conformity, whatever everyone else thinks.
Conformity and authority. I mean, this is what it's going to. I mean, but think about this though. It's conformity and authority in an area of your life that deeply influences your culture. This is why this plays. This is why this is so important. And you would have this in Islamic culture about how much emphasis you're going to put on the Quran versus the Hadith. I think it's versus the Hadith. If you are looking at multiple teachings of Buddha, you have to go, which one are we going to accept? Are you going to support just the Tao Te Ching, or are you going to support other stuff for those in that area by Shuangzi? Are you going to treat those as equal? You have this issue all over the place. How do you decide this? And the way most people have decided it is, or even think about now, how do we determine what the Constitution really says? Right? Because if you know the history of the constitutional law, and I'm sure you all do, you know that people have made some conclusions that we're now like, yeah, that was probably wrong when we said that.
Yeah, there's stuff that's wrong.
or that now there's stuff that's wrong, right? But it's like, well, but think about it. 150 years ago, when Dred Scott came before the court, they said, well, you know what? You got to go back. That's the law.
But that's SCOTA, that's what we have to say what's going on with the Constitution. So I guess with the New Testament, you would bring a conclave or whatever together of whoever you think is a church leader.
But if you're going to bring your constitutional scholars, I'm going to bring my constitutional scholars.
So hopefully there would be some deviance between them so that it would not just be everybody doing it.
But I want to know really what it says. I want to know really, do I have the right for the government not to read my text messages? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that my text messages are private. Right? So you bring yours, I bring mine. How do we decide which one of us is right? Or contraception was a big issue. When we were finally allowed to use contraception, that's nowhere mentioned in the Constitution. But we as a culture have said, we kind of like the right to privacy. Or other phrases that aren't in the Constitution. A wall between church and state. I'm not saying that it's wrong, I'm more saying that we have, as a culture, said we like that idea, and we think it's in the Constitution, but the words aren't there. But how do we answer these questions? I've used the New Testament, but you can use the Constitution to do this.
You can do it by vote.
We can do it by vote, but, you know, do you think, our next section, we're going to start moving to hierarchy. So if let's say we're going to vote on should women have the right to vote? We're going to vote on should women have the right to vote.
Do women get to vote?
Well, here's what's intriguing. Before women got the right to vote, many women actually opposed women getting the right to vote. They thought it would sully the nature of femininity to be involved in political disputes. And so so many women actually opposed it. Yeah, no, we don't really teach that. We teach it as one story of suffrage, and everybody wanted it, and men just wouldn't let them have it, and somehow they got it. I don't know, right? But if you're should blacks and whites be allowed to marry? Or should gays be allowed to marry? Should people who are homosexual be allowed to marry? That's an issue going in front of the Supreme Court this year. That's not in the Constitution, right? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say, So how do we decide if that is going to be a part of our social landscape?
I guess you'd have to think of what the cultural consensus is becoming.
How would I know what the cultural census is becoming?
Ask that question.
You could, but think about it. When Brown versus Board of Education was implemented, the cultural consensus really wasn't for eliminating desegregation in the South. But now we're like, oh yeah, well of course that's what we wanted. That's the direction we were moving. Yada yada yada. And here, it's a good question though to go. How would we decide if that's going to be part of our... Because remember, we're saying constitutional. That we're saying there is a constitutional right for this to happen.
Just go with the norm.
I think the people in power would decide. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Like everyone can... there could be a general idea that something's right, but the people in power don't agree, and it doesn't matter.
So who do we go with? Do we go with the people in power? Do you think... How do we decide this? How do you think the Supreme Court's going to... That's actually one we can ask as an empirical question. How do you think the Supreme Court is going to decide this? That's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now. Homosexuals have the right to marry. Not civil union, not... whatever. Oh,
I think
yes.
one good example is you can look at the schools, all those schools have different rules with dress codes and stuff like that, and who decides that is teachers and principals and the Board of Education.
But so you're gonna oppose the dress code. So you're gonna say I, as a person, have the right to wear.
Yeah, but students they have to follow whatever the Board of Education decides for that certain school. Like you have to have your shirt tucked in, or you can't
To a large extent, you're absolutely right, but dress codes have changed, so somehow they've changed. So how can we ask this a question? How do you think the Supreme Court is going to uphold bans on gay marriage, A, or do you think they're going to overturn them, B? So are they going to are they going to uphold them, A? And there's no right answer here. No one is going to lose. It is, what do you think the court is going to do? Are they going to uphold them, or are they going A, or overturn them, B? Oh, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. You want to see?
Yes.
Nah, you're not.
No.
I wonder what they're gonna
If one, wow. It is, what?
I wonder what they're gonna refer back to.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to go.
I think it just came up. I think it just came up to the Supreme Court like this week already.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yeah.
And they got shut down, I believe, already.
It already been shut down?
Pretty
I would
sure.
have heard it would be.
It hasn't been shut down yet. No, not yet.
It hasn't been, it will be decided for a while. Wow. All right, see y'all.